Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's something really messed up that you didn't realize was until you were much older? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Punishing children under 10 for showing up to school late when they rely on their parents or siblings to get them there. My grandma got married at 16 to my grandfather, who was 8 years older than her. She had 6 kids by the time she was 22. The family romanticized their relationship my whole life, but her dying words were, "At least I don't have to deal with him anymore." And the truth about him being an abusive piece of shit for 60 plus years surfaced after she passed. It's a sad reality for many women from her generation. I thought all parents were on their best behavior and pretending to be good people in public, and that when they got home, they were all angry and violent. I learned I was wrong in my early 20s and couldn't process the concept that not everyone's parents were faking their kindness. It still sometimes feels mind-blowing thinking about how so many parents are actually kind and loving to their kids. It made me really happy learning that some kids actually get to enjoy happy childhoods. Parents never being home. My mom works a lot, so I just figured my friends had similar situations. Single parent, grind and all, but no, most were just alcoholic gambling addicts that lived at the casinos and preferred pretending like their child didn't exist. Scary, prevalent in Vegas. How much my parents drank every day. I thought it was completely normal to drink a 12-pack or a box of wine per night. My parents keep their lives together and are productive people. I drank for 6 years and ended up homeless. Been sober a long time now. Alcohol continues to be the biggest wedge in our relationship. How soul-crushing and disparaging it is to work a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs just to keep your family from becoming homeless, and being poor or working class and trying to figure out ways to keep off the government radar the way rich people do, because being taxed for the $300 you made cleaning offices at night after your factory job could mean the difference between choosing between heat or electricity and being able to afford both that month. My dad worked in the auto industry and was like a machine. When he would get laid off of work, he would take whatever shit temp job he could get just to keep us afloat. I've had a few lean moments in my life that were nowhere near as desperate as his were, and I hope to Christ I'm never in his shoes. I know this is easier said than done. I'm just as guilty of it, but you gotta focus on what you're going through and what you're working on, and comparing your life to others is a recipe for anger and madness. So let's all try to be as grateful as we can be, because some of us work 2 or 5 jobs just to stay in this beautiful spot. Schools ignoring kid drama till the fight starts, then blames it on them when they're aware the kids don't get along. Pretty much you see a problem but do nothing about it because that kid isn't part of my class and it's not my problem. Not every kid will snitch because of fear. Only when the media gets involved, the school will throw down and act like they care about their students as if the school had real professionals. It's why a lot of us hated school, because almost every staff was fake AF. I say almost because some teachers were genuinely cool, but just seem like they have no power at all. A kid in 5th grade crying and sobbing after he got a 94 on his exam said his parents needed him to get 96 or up, which is a high A from where I used to live, or else he'd be beaten. The teacher couldn't really do anything. I didn't realize how messed up it was until years later when I moved countries. Growing up, I didn't realize how messed up it was that my parents never talked openly about mental health. It was sort of a taboo topic, and seeking therapy or acknowledging mental health struggles was seen as a sign of weakness. As I got older, I came to understand the importance of destigmatizing mental health issues and the value of seeking help when needed. It's something I wish I had recognized earlier to promote a healthier mindset from the start. My family dynamic and a lot of neglect I experienced. My mother isolated herself and therefore her children from their entire family. I didn't realize it wasn't normal to not leave the house for days or weeks on end as a kid. Of course, during the school year, I would go to school, but otherwise literally never left the house. During the summer, there were no family visits or barbecues or family functions of any kind. As I got older, my mother remarried and almost entirely forgot about me. I couldn't join any school clubs or activities, couldn't play sports, couldn't see friends. My entire life was my room, which I wouldn't leave for literally weeks on end during the summers. I hated my main life and blamed myself for so long, but I'm realizing now how awful my mother was. I'm incredibly resentful and have basically no relationship with her anymore, and because of her, no relationship with any extended family whatsoever. It's been lonely. How self-sufficient I had to be from my young age. My parents both had to work full-time and couldn't afford consistent care for me, so I was on my own majority of the time. I was woken up in the morning before my mom left for work, and sometimes dinner was made for me. But that was about it, other than my parents checking in on me in the evenings. It wasn't really their fault entirely, but it's a little messed up how I became a hyper-independent person who's still working on being able to ask or accept help or not feel so fiercely about doing everything myself in my 30s. I catch myself telling childhood stories, and it sometimes hits me how screwed up things were, even for the 90s. Dads being looked down on for playing with, hugging, or kissing their sons. Dads getting the cops called on them for playing with their daughters at the park without their wife there as well. Mothers having to go back to work early or at night to keep food on the table. An informal part of freshman orientation at my high school included the older girls warning the new ones about which male teachers to avoid being alone with. Relatedly, the art teacher advised us all to wear shorts under our uniform skirts so boys couldn't upskirt us in the stairwells. And there was a nun who roamed the halls during her free periods to pop into other classes and make the teachers stop what they're doing and have all the girls stand up so she could examine the length of our skirts. The school eventually shut down because the teachers kept getting arrested, but that took a decade after I graduated. Oh boy, my parents being so focused on my high-functioning but special needs brother that I was largely left alone until I was like 14, and then at that point I was so resentful I was a huge asshole to them, even though I was the golden child and got really good grades through college and mostly spent more time alone in my room, and outside of that I would just be allowed to walk to school by myself or walk like 2 miles to hang out at my friend's house or walk to our downtown main drag and hang out with people much older than me. And then, when I could drive, I would drive our second car, yes, I know, into the city with my friends and then lie about what I was doing, and no one seemed to care beyond asking why the mileage was high, and I'd lie again. Now I'm executor of their estate, and I'm giving my brother anything they leave to me so he can get an apartment. I'm also helping him find a job. Early 2000s were weird. Hitting or screaming at your partner. Until I was almost an adult, I thought a good relationship meant having someone who you could direct all your anger at. They'd do the same to you, and you'd still love each other. I looked forward to that connection with someone else. I thought the biggest issue in my parents' marriage was how they had violence against each other, and they'd be happier if they just accepted how things are. It took a while to undo that thinking. I still struggle not to associate love with violence or the forgiveness of it. I was a horrible brother who bullied my younger brother when I should have been protecting and loving him. He's 5 years younger than me. We had a very bad relationship in our young years because he was never taught to respect my personal space. He broke my toys, killed my pets, and made my Nintendo nearly unplayable after spilling a Mountain Dew in it. I was just mean and angry. He was overweight and reclusive, and I teased him for it. He would pick his nose and eat the boogers on the school bus, and kids would call him names for it. I just went along with it. Had I been a bigger physically and emotionally person, I would have stood up for him. But I was small-minded and physically small, so fighting would have been a bad idea. I've apologized multiple times, but he still holds a grudge and we barely have a relationship. On my last visit, he went off on me and told me everything I used to do and how it made him feel. He said I never apologized, despite me doing so multiple times in the last few years. We're both in our 40s now. He's still reclusive, lives with my parents, and loves to write and do art. I was making really good money a few years ago and offered to help him move out or do something else with his life. I've given him tons of things to help him with his interests. He's just content where he is. I still feel like shit, but I can't do anything else about it. Social isolation. My parents got divorced and moved a few hours from each other. They were codependent on us kids and very controlling of our time and keeping us near them. I effectively didn't have friends from the second grade until I went to university. I struggled for years to form meaningful or lasting relationships. Still do. Once you're behind on this stuff, it's hard to catch up. Spent my 20s learning things and making mistakes most people did in high school. Fat shaming. My parents would always tell my siblings and I that getting fat is a no-go in our family, and we should always stay away from people who are overweight. One of my brothers was overweight, but not in an unhealthy way. He's just a big guy, which was genetically given from my mom's side. Two of my uncles were also big, with good muscles built. I don't know what you call it, but my brother had that gene going on. Throughout our entire childhood, my parents would belittle my brother and make him starve to lose weight. My parents went as far as to have myself and my little brother make fun of him for being fat when he wasn't. As we grew older, we eventually start telling our parents off for their toxic behavior. So whenever my parents try to fat shame us, we fat shame them when the opportunity strikes. And for those who are curious, my brothers and I have a tight relationship now. After enduring so much emotional, mental, and physical abuse from our parents, we got professional help to learn to cope with our feelings better and hang out together when we have the chance. Being told I had to be nice to the boy that continually asked me out or gave me romantic gifts, even though I rejected him politely for years. From 5th grade, 10 years old, until sophomore year of high school, 15 years old, this boy asked me out and gave me unwanted gifts and poems for every holiday and school dance. All the teachers, my classmates, knew what was going to happen. Literally every adult in my life told me I had to be polite when I turned him down. I didn't have to accept his gifts or go out with him, but I had to consider his feelings when letting him down. Years later, after surviving an abusive relationship, my therapist pointed out how no one considered my feelings back then, and that perhaps living a third of my life being told I needed to care more about a boy's feelings than my own warped my perception of my own feelings being valid and that I had right to speak up for myself. A lot of the punishments I received as a kid, me and my friends were swapping archetypal childhood memories when we were in our early 20s, and I shared some story and nonchalantly ended it with something along the lines of, "You know what I'm talking about? We all went through that," only to be met by stunned silence and the realization that a lot of the things that were done to me were profoundly effed up. The pressure on young Christian women to dress modestly and not to be a stumbling block for the men around her. It's an impossible standard to keep up with this full burden of sexual purity on her. I wasn't allowed to have darts in my Christian school uniform as to not draw attention to my shape. We are talking about darts on a button-up shirt that were already too big for me. Women are art, and the responsibility for that is placed on them and their choice of clothing. I still struggle to unlearn it. Being unsupervised for 90% of our childhood, and that shit is a form of abuse. From the age of like 5, we were playing in graveyards and crawling through the storm drains. Mom refuses to believe she wasn't watching us 24/7, but we spent full days, even on our own property with no parent in sight, climbing onto our roof to jump over a concrete path and land on grass as our older, 5 at the time, sister even got me as a 3-year-old and our 1-year-old sibling into a pram and shoved us down a steep concrete hill. After finally coming to terms with our shit childhood, me and my sister, very nicely, brought it up to her mother, which she cried, said she never left us alone, that she was abused too by our father, who physically and verbally abused us and only verbally abused her, then stated she wanted to leave and check out of life. She has attempted suicide a year prior to this already, and that we obviously blame her for everything and she's a shit parent, which we never said. In fact, we were very soft in how we approached the subject and said it wasn't her fault, which it partially is. Anyway, realizing your childhood was actually abusive and not being able to have an adult conversation with your parents about the hurt they caused without them threatening suicide is effing messed up.